Why isn't the medical system telling us how to eat, what sunlight to get, how to avoid damage from artificial light? Well, because there's no profit there. They profit by doing surgeries, by selling pills. In medical school, I sort of realized that modern medicine doesn't actually help people get better. The goal is just to keep people hooked on medications. The goal is to prolong sickness. And it was really, really disappointing for me. I did the paleo diet and I felt 1,000% better physically, mentally, energy-wise. And I started questioning, well, if this diet worked so well for me and I didn't really have any bad health problems, but I just felt better, wouldn't it work for all these miserable patients that I see every day in the hospital? And I started reading about it, and it turns out that actually, yes, it's through diet, it's through lifestyle that you actually help people heal. And that's the actual way of healing people rather than pills.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Ask a Bitcoiner 21 Questions. I'm your host, Saida Gomez. Today, I am so honored because Dr. Ahmad Ammous will join us today to discuss how to navigate health in 2026. With all of these things that we see and read online, he's going to simplify things so that we can make better health choices. And just remember that this is a full interview, so there will be a 12-word seed phrase spread throughout this segment. If you're the first to find all 12 words, and of course, sweep the wallet first, 21,000 sats are yours. So good luck. Dr. Ammous, how are you today?
Hi, Saida. I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I was telling you briefly before we started to record that I'm happy to have started following you on social media because you helped to wean me off of my Bluetooth headphone addiction that I had for quite a few years. And I think that there are so many other small things like that the average person doesn't consider, how it could impact their health and stuff. So I think that you will bring great insight to me personally and, of course, to the audience.
Thank you. I hope so.
Can you share how your journey began to become a doctor and how that may have coincided with your personal health journey?
Yeah, so I grew up, my father was a physician. I've always wanted to be a doctor. I worked hard to get into medical school. I had to do an undergraduate degree first, and then I went into medical school. And when I was in medical school, I was so excited to get people feeling better, to heal people. And then in medical school, I sort of realized that modern medicine doesn't actually help people get better. The goal is just to keep people hooked on medications. The goal is to prolong sickness. And it was really, really disappointing for me. You know, I've worked so hard to get into medical school. I still had so many years ahead of me. It was really disappointing for me thinking, oh, I'm not really helping people get better.
Yeah.
And during the same time, my brother recommended that I try the paleo diet. And I did the paleo diet and I felt 1,000% better physically, mentally, energy-wise. And I started questioning, well, if this diet worked so well for me and I didn't really have any bad health problems, but I just felt better, wouldn't it work for all these miserable patients that I see every day in the hospital? And I started reading about it, and it turns out that actually, yes, it's through diet, it's through lifestyle that you actually help people heal. And that's the actual way of healing people rather than pills.
So coming to this discovery in medical school, where, from what I understand, like I live in Switzerland, the pharma industry is quite significant here. Isn't that kind of counter to the training, the education or indoctrination that you receive? And how do you sort of deal with that, that sort of contradiction that's living as you progress through school?
Yeah, it was very difficult. It was very difficult because the medical education just wants to teach you how to sell pills.
Yeah.
There's no profit in telling people how to eat right, how to live right, how to move right. And so all I was taught was pills, how to give more pills, when do people need surgery, etc. And it was really, really hard for me. There were multiple points where I thought about quitting because, what's the point of learning how to give people pills, even though these pills
Yeah.
have a lot of side effects and often do more harm than good? And so I strongly considered quitting, but I wanted to stay in the system because unfortunately most people are entangled in the system, and I wanted to be able to know how to get them off the system, how to get them off pills, because it's an entire science of its own of how toxic these pills are, and how to get people off them. But at the same time, I continued to be curious, and I kept reading on my own natural healing modalities, what the ideal human diet is, what's the ideal light environment is. And I kept experimenting on myself and trying on my friends and family and stuff. And that's how I learned what I learn now.
And so experimenting, did your friends and family think, oh, here he is again, running an experiment, or were they receptive to your approach?
They were not very receptive. There is most people are kind of brainwashed, and they expect their doctor to just be someone who's just going to tell them take this pill. We've sort of, like, the entire culture has become brainwashed, where the only expectation is you get sick, someone comes and gives you this natural this magical solution that in a pill, and all your problems go away. But that's not how the human body works, unfortunately.
Yeah.
You need to address the root cause. There's something wrong that you're doing, and you need to address that. And most people are, too high time preference to think that way.
Yeah, I totally agree. I remember growing up. So my parents, they are from Trinidad and Tobago, but they immigrated to Canada before I was born. And I think that I personally am lucky because they were raised in a very sort of organic way without wanting to be. I don't even think that branding existed at the time. So, I remember as a kid, my mom cooking like pig foot, chicken foot. She would make liver and stuff, and feeling totally embarrassed because my Canadian friends didn't eat any of those things. But, they would explain to me the importance of proper nutrition, especially with liver, even though I still to this day can't stand the taste of it. But they really sort of instilled that in me as a foundation. And as I started to get older, obviously I rebelled and I ate, all the junk food and the sweets and the candies and stuff. And now, for Lent, I actually gave up processed foods completely and sugar. And I've noticed a positive change in my body. And now that I'm a mom as well, I try to instill in my daughter not to eat sweets. On Fridays in the morning, she'll get like a piece of chocolate or something, but we don't have like candies or anything here. But at school, she gets a lot. So I try like, yeah, I try to eat well and to live well as well, but I find that it's just very challenging to actually be consistent with it in the environment.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. We have attacks from various vectors. We have the pharmaceutical industry that doesn't want to focus on lifestyle because they want to keep you sick and sell you pills. And we have also the processed food industry that's, throwing their processed junk at us right, left, and center. And, they get the kids indoctrinated from early on so that they're hooked on sugar from the beginning. So it's a hard battle to fight, unfortunately. But, we have to do our best. Perfection, eating every meal, that a perfect meal every time, is not possible these days. But, as much as possible, at least make sure that home meals are healthy. Control what you can control, and then, uh, that is better than nothing.
Yeah, definitely. So you mentioned that your brother recommended the paleo diet, and you noticed a positive change when you switched to that. And your brother is also Seyfuddin Ammous, author of the Bitcoin Standard, the Fiat Standard, Principles of Economics. Um, so did that coincide as well with you learning about Bitcoin and then going down sort of the path of understanding, the fiat system and food, or were those sort of two separate things?
Yeah, it was funny because my brother was kind of going through his Bitcoin revelation around the same time that I started medical school, and we lived together. So he was starting to clearly understand how the financial system and the economic system is being run and is corrupt, while at the same time I was understanding how the medical system was corrupt. And we'd come back at the end of the day and just compare notes about, oh, how similar everything seems to be. And everything is driven by fiat currency and, governments having unlimited power to print money. And so it all ties together, and it's sort of like you understand everything at the same time. And a lot of the incentives to keep people sick are driven by this fiat-funded government. And you start to see it everywhere once you understand Bitcoin.
Okay. And so at that time, medical school, learning about Bitcoin at the same time with your brother, was there, how did the sort of maybe connected environment look at that time? Was social media so pervasive? Were people spending so much time on screens, or was it still relatively calm in those days?
This was like 2014 or something.
Okay.
I think back then our understanding of how corrupt the medical system was not as prevalent as it is now. I think COVID really changed how people view the medical system. So the talk about the financial system and the economic system and the money printing was there on social media, but the medical stuff was not. So I it wasn't easy to kind of find resources about, okay, so what actually is helping people get better? How toxic are these medications? What are the issues with them? You have to kind of go into the deep ends of the internet to find such information. But yeah, it's more accessible now, thankfully.
Yeah. And it is more accessible now, but I guess the flip side of that as well is that we're spending more time on screens and stuff. And so, for example, I feel as though I can spend, back in 2014, I wasn't even mindful of the time I spent online because I feel as though it was less developed and more of my life was offline. And so I felt fine. And today, I feel as though it is fully possible to spend 10 hours online. And I notice a huge difference with brain fog. I notice a difference with, my crankiness, my moodiness, my patience and stuff. And so today, it feels as though while there is more information accessible, obtaining that information, the media is having different types of side effects.
Yeah, it is unfortunate. It is unfortunate. It's like a vortex that takes you in, and you have to be very, very conscious of how much time you spend on it. Uh, it is like being a Bitcoiner too. It's hard to live in the real world because kind of everyone around you is brainwashed and still believes that the government's out there trying to protect you and still believes in the medical system. So it's hard to put the effort to go out and meet people and make connections because it's hard to find people on the same wavelength. So that's a difficult balance for people to balance. And I don't know what the answer is. I try to minimize my screen time. That's where most of my most interesting discussions happen, though. So
Yeah.
I try to spend time in nature where I'm not really even reading, or it's just be in nature, be out there, and try and spend time with people, even if it's superficial, and just enjoy it. Because
Yeah.
the problem with screens is not just that it's taking away your attention. The actual blue light that's being emitted is actually harmful to your health. So in nature, blue light does not exist in isolation. Uh, Blue light is a spectrum from the visible spectrum. We have the different colors of the spectrum. In nature, you get blue light. It's always paired with red, with infrared, and UV light. But since the invention of LED technology, we are now able to generate blue light on its own. And our bodies are not used to handling this technology on its own, this light spectrum. And it starts to become inflammatory to the body, actually.
Yeah.
So it's directly toxic to us being under artificial light and in front of screens for so long.
Yeah. That's kind of what I'm yeah. And so is that so is there a link, I guess, with the increase in blue light exposure and all of these, these diseases that may be present in our body, but maybe, manifesting, or I don't know what the word is, but growing faster than they would have been, say, 20 or 30 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. There's researchers are not interested in answering this question because it's hard to say whether this is an actual agenda that they want to actually get us sick and keep us hooked on to blue light, or if just research is not interested in actually figuring out the truth because
Yeah.
there's no profit to be made by telling people to get off screens. So it's hard to know what the motives are, but there isn't that much research there. And it's confounded by the fact that, also over the last few years, we've had an alarming increase in other sort of toxins, including
Yeah.
injections that people have gotten. So that could be driving the rates of disease. We're also
Wait, when you
exposed.
say injections, are you referring to cosmetic injections or
No, yes, other
other types
injections
of?
that started
Yeah.
after the pandemic.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's one. The other major driver, and still there's very little research about that, is our exposure to electromagnetic frequencies. So that's a field of medicine that also is very suppressed. But what are these technologies, like Wi-Fi, like radio frequencies, like cell tower signals? What are they doing to our biology? And, using animal models and using some correlational studies, we know that it does have an effect on living material, living cells. How much is it affecting us as humans? And unfortunately, there's also not that much interest in figuring out that answer.
So we're like the regular layperson is left to figure it out for themselves. And when you have children, for your kids as well. Um, so so as a mom, okay, let me backtrack even more. When I was growing up, I'm quite sensitive to things, right? So if I consume something, if I don't feel well, I know that I won't eat that. You know, it's the case with food. It's the case with like different types of drinks or anything. I feel it. My body rejects it right away. Famously, when I was like, I think 19, I went on the birth control pill. And my doctor back then was so cool in Toronto. He was like, you probably don't want to do this. I can't deny you this, this pill. So here, try this. I did. It made me feel absolutely terrible. And very quickly, I came off of it. It was really easy for me to, I guess, isolate the variable that wasn't making me feel well. But today, I learn about like blue light, cortisol levels, seed oils, processed food. I feel like there's so many variables out there that it's so difficult to do, I guess, like elimination where you take one thing away and is it this? Is it this? Is it this? And that's just for me. For my child, she's out there, she's at school, she goes to birthday parties. Some parents, like one parent is like they're vegan, which is not my thing. Some other parents are totally cool with the candies. There are sweets everywhere. We try to get her to eat real food. I heard, I guess, a dietitian here speaking in French, talking about processed foods and the level of, they call it, I think it's les aliments transformés, like transformed, the different levels. And so you want to eat something that is not, that's barely transformed. It's like you can cook meat quickly, you can boil eggs, you can make eggs or whatever. But there's so much information to navigate for myself, for my daughter. I try to make recommendations to my husband, but sometimes I'm not even sure. So how do you deal and navigate all of these things?
It's difficult, and again, you don't expect perfection. Don't expect to be 100%, living as if you lived in nature. It's not possible these days. So do the best you can. And I think, a good starting point is think, is this something that my ancestors 200 years ago would have eaten? And ideally, is this something that, my ancestors 10,000 years would have eaten? So this is a very good starting point. So anything that's made in a factory, try and eliminate. And what does that leave you? It leaves you with meat, with vegetables, with fruits, with fresh foods. Go to the supermarket, shop from the not from the center, from the sides of the supermarket. That's where all the fresh food is. And that's your starting point of at least have that at home, that be your ideal. That's what you're eating every day. And if your base for your nutrition and for your kids' nutrition is solid and natural, then you can tolerate, once or twice a week having junk and having processed stuff because your body is able to detox. And so I think that's the best way to do it. Just be in control of what the kids are eating at home. And when it comes to processed food, I think vegetable seed oils are ones that, should never enter your home. They will be in any restaurant food that you eat, so just be aware of that. And if you go to restaurants, try and avoid fried foods, deep fried, because those tend to have the highest level of seed oils, and those where the seed oils are cooked to very high temperatures. And, a lot of the food toxicity is bad, but nothing compares to how bad pharmaceuticals are. So
Okay.
that is the main thing you need to try and avoid for yourself and for your children. Avoid pills, avoid injections as much as possible, and that goes a very long way into keeping your body healthy and clean.
So, okay, you mentioned earlier, since I guess 2020, there's been an increase in some of these diseases and stuff. And I have to say that I haven't been to my doctor in quite some time because I've lost confidence in well, okay, so thank you for that encouragement, but it also makes me quite nervous. My daughter's pediatrician, one thing that really made me respect him tremendously is that at that time there were rumors that perhaps children should be injected as well. And he said, absolutely not. Like he was very much, if she was, cause she was born in October of 2019. And so it was just before this. I was just getting used to being a mom and I was sincerely very concerned. I didn't know how to navigate. And I remember him saying, think of, things your grandmother would do, or what did your parents do growing up? And I know that, like when I was maybe 5 or 6, if I coughed a lot, they'd give me a bit of honey and lemon. My mother refused to give me any type of medication. I'd have maybe half a children's Tylenol if it was something really, really bad. And that was very rare. All of these, like, I'd get a cold, I'd cough, go to school, you're fine. Like there was less of an emphasis on, seeing the doctor consistently or taking drugs, I call them drugs, and taking prescriptions and stuff. But today it seems that we're just preoccupied with this. I mean, for weight loss, for example, this goes for men and women. Instead of just exercising and maybe cutting back on sugar, right away in social settings, the discussion goes to Ozempic right away. Like it just seems like a lot. And I wonder, will this continue to snowball in this direction or will there be some kind of correction eventually?
Yeah, I mean the growth in the pharmaceutical industry that the pharmaceutical industry saw in the 20th century is nothing short of extraordinary. They are, they're worth trillions of dollars now, and they have the GDP of more than most countries. So we've gotten used to just pharmaceuticals being a part of life, but that's not how we evolved as human beings. Before in the 1800s, pills didn't exist. This is only something that's happened over the last 100 or so years. So no, the human body is not born with any deficiency in any pharmaceuticals. This is all just propaganda and marketing just to sell people these medications where they can make very high margins from. So yes, you don't need pills, and the propaganda has been very strong. And the propaganda isn't just marketing of TV advertisements for drugs. The propaganda is using medical journals, by changing medical school curricula, by convincing doctors that pills are necessary and important. All these things have led us to live in a world where we rely on pills as sort of the fix for everything.
So in medical school then, or as, in your practice, how do you navigate then sort of the status quo of prescribing pills and then speaking to your patients about what they eat, or, whether they get sunlight, or do they monitor the blue light that they may absorb?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm lucky because I attract people who want to learn about these things.
Yeah.
I attract people that want to look at it from a different perspective, that they just don't want to have pills on them. And I mean, a very important thing that I do for people is if they are on pills, to get them off them, because the long-term consequences of pills are not great. So you can heal yourself without pills if you address the root cause and live naturally, a natural life. And that's what I try and teach people.
Yeah. Natural life and avoid pills. And for your kids, when, if you do have a pediatrician or someone who says, well, let's prescribe this for your child, how do you address that as a parent? How do you, I don't want to say fight back, because I don't want it to be antagonistic, but how do you find the right way?
Yeah, I don't envy people, because it's very, very difficult to convince someone from, the centralized medical system to think outside the box. It's even if you bring the best research, even if you have the best intentions, they are just indoctrinated into a certain way of looking at the body, of, everything is a pill deficiency and here's the fix for it. So it's very hard to kind of like convince them. What I would suggest is, take what your pediatrician takes, take their advice, do your own research, weigh the benefits and risks of whatever they're recommending, and know that there's a lot of natural solutions for many of the problems that they recommend pills for. And, consider doing a natural treatment before you do any pharmaceutical.
Yeah. One thing I will say about Geneva is that there are a number of I guess there's a TCM center in town, and there are alternative options that are offered. So it is possible. You need the time, of course, and perhaps, the resources, because I'm not sure if insurance covers it, but it is possible to explore other channels. But again, as a non-expert, you don't know like which path to go down in order to get, just not even optimal results, but just to live without, this medical concern in your mind all the time.
It is difficult. I don't envy people, but thankfully there's a lot of like people online that you can follow, and they can help give you guidance. So, if you're on social media, try and find like-minded physicians, like-minded health influencers who seem to, think of more natural ways of looking at the body, and that's helpful for you. Try and get their perspective on how things go. And there's going to be more and more services offered online where people are can give you guidance using natural treatments rather than traditional pharmaceuticals.
Yeah, definitely. And you are a good account to follow. You post a lot about like morning sun, for example. I remember seeing those ones. And I think you say that it is the best light of the day that you can get.
Yes, if there's one thing you want to get out of this interview, the best health intervention you can do for yourself, more important than any dietary intervention or anything or any supplement, etc., is try and go outside in the morning as early as you can and get some morning sunlight. Even if it's 10 minutes, just go outside, stand where the sun is, look in the direction of the sun, and just do that every morning. Even if it's cloudy, even if it's cold, you're still getting the benefit of the rays of the sun. So do that every day. What that does is, your body relies on the signals from the sun to set your circadian rhythm, which is your internal clock that controls the secretion of important hormones and neurotransmitters. This signal, you know, it doesn't initiate this internal clock. What sets it is seeing this morning sun. That's what tells your body, oh, okay, we're in a new day. This is what I need to start doing. And that sets your metabolism up. So this is the most important health intervention that I recommend for anyone.
And so your circadian rhythm, the way you sleep, helps you with most everything else in life. So weight, your insulin levels, cortisol, stress, and all the rest of that stuff.
Yeah, so the signals that your eyes and skin get from light are the ones that control all hormonal and neurotransmitter signals in your body. And why is this important? So that controls your cortisol. So that controls your energy levels during the day. If you're the kind of person who is feeling low energy during the day, and then at night, all of a sudden you get this burst of energy and you can't go to bed, well, that's because you're not getting the proper light signals. You're getting too much light at night and not enough light during the day. Same thing with people who seem to be hungry all the time. And that is also because your leptin, which is a hormone that controls appetite, those signals are also controlled by light. So that's how important light is. Other thing include there's something called like beta endorphins, and these are kind of natural opioids that your body release in response to the sun. So a lot of people that feel low energy and feel depressed and feel anxious, it's because they're not getting enough sun, and that's causing them to not get these natural endorphins. So all of these things can be fixed by having brighter days and having darker nights. And that sets your circadian rhythm more in line with what the sun cycles are.
And when it rains, so this is the other thing. So living in Switzerland is fantastic because, this place is a godsend. I started hiking when I moved here. I magically lost weight when I moved here because I think maybe, they're a little bit behind on food processing, which I'm not complaining about. Also, like we go to the market and we get, cheese unpasteurized that's properly made. We eat a lot of meats and stuff because it's very available, especially in my village. But one of the downsides is that from, I want to say November to March, there's no light. It rains all the time. And so I started taking vitamin D supplements because I understand that does compensate somewhat for a lack of sunlight. So what do we do when there is no morning light?
Yeah, even if it's cloudy, if it's raining, it's difficult to go out. But even if it's cloudy, there's still some light out, like it's brighter than pitch black, then there's still some benefit to being outside. There's still some photons that are going through the clouds. So try and maximize going out even on cloudy days. On rainy days, it's a little bit more difficult. Some things that can help, set your circadian rhythm are things like exercise, things like sauna, things like cold exposure, doing like a cold shower or a cold plunge. These sort of things kind of like activate your mitochondria, the energy house of the cell, even though there's not much light outside.
Yeah, I love the sauna as well. Something else I discovered coming here, there are so many les bains, public baths and stuff with saunas that I sleep like a baby after a sauna session.
Mm-hmm. So that sort of activates the same sort of compounds that being in the sunlight activates. So that's helpful. And, also be more conscious of your diet during the winter, because in the winter, there's less light to grow, fruits. So you need to be more careful about your sugar consumption during the winter, because our body's ability to digest sugar is better when there's a lot of light out. So in the summer, you're able to tolerate a lot of fruits. In the winter, you might want to be shifting to a more of a low carb sort of diet that's meat and fat heavy rather than carbohydrate heavy.
That's good to know. Very good to know. So is there anything that, we say Bitcoin fixes it. Bitcoin fixes everything. In the case of war, for example, we talk about, defunding wars buy, buying Bitcoin as opposed to, bonds, for example, debt that help to finance wars. Can the same thing be said with pharmaceuticals? Is there any way to, not actively participate from a financial or economic perspective in the pharma industry in order to regain some kind of balance?
Yes. So the pharmaceutical industry is not this monster that was created just by just through the free market, and they were able to sell a lot of pills, and that's how they gained their monopoly. The reason they are so powerful is because they're protected by patents initiated
Um,
by the government. So government force is what allows pharmaceutical industry to maintain their monopoly on treatments and to make so much money because there's no competition for them. And the reason why the government is so powerful and able to maintain this very powerful industry is because the government has access to printed money and has access to unlimited force because of that printing money. So Bitcoin fixes that because now pharmaceutical industry is no longer would no longer be backed by a government backed by fiat money, and they would have to play by the rules. If their treatments are not working for people, then people are going to go to use other treatments. The reason why pharmaceutical treatments are being pushed on us is because the pharmaceutical industry took over medical school curricula. So all medical
um,
education is about pills and about surgeries and about just giving pharmaceuticals, while before 100 years ago that wasn't the case. Healing was based on lifestyle and based on natural treatments. And all this power that was given to the pharmaceutical industry was enabled by government. It wasn't just an organic thing. And once the government isn't so powerful, we're able to regain some of that power back.
yeah. Yeah. So it's IP and patents, which is something else that's very fascinating within the Bitcoin space because I mean, things are copied. This concept of open source, for example, kind of flies in the face of, the whole IP and the patent industry. Is there a sort of a pharma open source movement as well, where, we don't want pills, but maybe there are some solutions that are chemical that, are free on the market that people can look into as well?
Yeah, in general, a lot of treatments don't need to be expensive. A lot of generic medications are just as good. But if the pharmaceutical industry is always looking to find the next breakthrough of something they can patent, so all the propaganda goes into recommending patented drugs, while the generics are lost and nobody talks about them. I'm not 100% against pharmaceuticals. There's definitely very important uses for drugs, and there's definitely very good uses for modern medicine in case someone gets into an accident or breaks a leg or all these
Yeah.
things. We shouldn't throw out the baby with the bathwater, as
Yeah.
they say. So, but it's very hard to know what is actually helpful for people and what is actually propaganda, because you can't rely on pharmaceutical studies because they're corrupt. So that's the reason why we need to be talking about this fixed system is corrupt, needs to be fixed, we need to take apart the system and build something new. That the goal of the system is to heal people rather than just keep making medications for a certain industry.
Yeah, I mean, with again, being a layperson on the outside, from what I see, I would agree with that. And this may be controversial. I remember maybe 10 or 15 years ago, there was a push for cancer screening. Get tested, get tested, get tested. And again, just reading the news, I see as well that with the screening, there seems to be more cases of that. Is it possible that perhaps it's not really that sickness? Do you know what I mean? Like, am I being paranoid, or is there, or are people being treated for something they don't have, and the treatment is what's making them? ill. I say this because 3 people I went to school with had stage 4 cancer, 2 died. We're talking 40s here, and 1 is in remission. And it's like, and then sort of a cohort that's a little older than me. Quite a few people have passed away from cancer. And I remember speaking to my parents saying, when you were in your 40s, was this happening as well? And they said, absolutely not. Like, there's something happening.
Yeah, I mean, we live in a more toxic world right now. So
Yeah.
the rates of cancer are definitely going up. Uh, regards to cancer screening, the purpose of cancer screening is not to actually protect people from cancer. It's actually just as a profit for the medical industry, because they're able to do so many surgeries and sell toxic chemotherapy, etc. If the actual goal was to protect people from cancer, then they would be advising people on lifestyle interventions to prevent cancer, rather than screening people for when it's actually already too late. Why isn't the medical system telling us how to eat, what sunlight to get, how to avoid damage from artificial light? Well, because there's no profit there. They profit by doing surgeries, by selling pills, and that's the goal of cancer screening.
Is it really that easy? Sunlight, eating well. I mean, you're giving me hope, and you're easing a little bit of my anxiety, because I would say for the past maybe 2 years, whereas I wasn't terribly concerned about my health, all of a sudden, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. I'm looking around thinking, like, what's next? Who's next? Kind of thing. So it's that easy getting sunlight.
I think it's definitely helpful. The most helpful thing you
Yeah.
can do is just avoid pharmaceuticals. Again,
Yeah.
that's the key. A lot of the people that we have, we've seen these turbo cancers and stage 4 cancers are because of injections that we got post the pandemic. So
Yeah. My dad was big on that. He said, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
he's an intelligent man.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Dr. Ammous, thank you again for being on the podcast, for listening and offering, I think, very basic and accessible advice. What you talk about is so, I guess, fundamental and maybe so valuable because we've lost touch with it, like literally going outside and getting sunlight and touching grass as well, I would say.
100%, yes. These basic things that, reconnect us with nature, those are very important.
Where can people find you if they want to follow you on socials, or if they have more specific questions that relate to them? How can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so you can find me. I'm most active on X at Ammous MD. I also have an Instagram account, and you can find me on my website at ammousmd.com. I also have a free newsletter that people can sign up for.
It's not quite yet over. You may have found all 12 seed words, but you'll certainly notice that something is missing if you try to sweep the wallet. The passphrase. To find it, go to bitcoinartmagazine.com, and to know what you're looking for, you'll have to follow Bitcoin Art Magazine on X and on Nostr, and of course you'll have to follow Asanoa as well. Good luck. Links in the description.